One of the big challenges I think that as an industry we face from a sustainability perspective is the ability to track what's being actually put into the building, what systems, what materials, and how those materials and systems operate. That historically, we've designed something to be sustainable. We maybe made a material selection, but again, the contractor will come back and say, I can't get that material. That material is too expensive. Here's a different material that it meets the same, or has the same criteria. And at the surface, that may be the case, but more and more what we're seeing is if you dig into how that material is actually going to perform, it won't be the same. No two materials are the same. We design and specify buildings to be operated a very specific way with a very specific equipment. And when that equipment is changed out to a different brand, to a different manufacturer, those systems operate differently. When we talk about the realm of digital delivery, one of the core issues that we face as a profession is
how architects and construction professionals can leverage digital tools to transform their workflows and secure their intellectual property. I'm Mohammed, your host, and welcome to Birdflocks Talks, where we dive into actionable strategies and insights that help architects thrive in today's digital-first world. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Timothy Dufault, co-founder and chief revenue officer at Concert, a digital workflow platform that aims to transform the AEC industry. With over 2 decades of experience as a licensed architect and former CEO of a leading architectural firm in the US, Timothy has dedicated his career to advancing how we deliver projects, integrate technology, and secure digital assets. In this episode, we'll discuss some important topics, including the challenges of digital transformation and why firms struggle to adopt it, how blockchain, secure intellectual property, and digital project records, how AI and digital tools are shaping the future of design and project management. I would like to ask you to sign up at birdflocks.com and join my community, Birdflocks Talks, to have access to all the insightful sessions that we have and the resources that we provided for you. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Birdflocks Talks and you can find it. And without further ado, let's jump to my conversation with Timothy Dufault. All right, welcome to Birdflocks Talks, Tim. It's my honor to have you here today.
good morning from my side, good afternoon from your side.
Yes, good afternoon from Netherlands and good morning from US. Tim, can you tell us about your earlier career and what led you to co-found Concert?
Sure. So, as an architect, I worked for most of my career. I worked to try and improve how we deliver in the industry. I worked for a company called Cunningham for 30 years, and I was CEO of that company for 15 years. And as CEO of the company, my job was really to focus on what was going to make our practice better, how we were going to continue to improve what we delivered to our clients, also how we could leverage what was developing and happening in the industry, especially around the realm of technology, to better our practice, better deliver what we created, and also to improve just our general overall performance as a firm and as architects. So I've had my hand in technology for a very, very long time, but also understood that, as an architect, technology is a tool, and the way that you use that tool becomes critically important to the value that you're delivering to your client. So around 2019, we started looking at what some of the challenges we might be facing as a firm and as an industry going into the coming years. And obviously we didn't know about COVID, but we did clearly see that technology was moving to a place where we were creating and developing more digital value than we were in terms of just the traditional norms of sheets and drawings and traditional contract documents. The challenge that we faced was, how do we share digital information with an understanding that we're in control of that information, that we have authority and we can prove that it's authentic when we share it, because most of the systems in place, even today, do not create permanent indelible records that can't be changed or that can't be modified or maliciously can't be hacked and turned into something else. So we set out to understand how that might work. We met with some people in Silicon Valley, and ultimately we came to a place where we determined that we could create a blockchain-based recording system that would provide that capability to have a clear understanding of what we were delivering, to create a permanent record of that information that could never be modified, changed, deleted in any way, so that there was always a mechanism to go back to create a, if you will, a story, a virtual storyboard of everything we share in a project. It gives you the history of decisions. It gives you the history of information as it was shared, and ultimately turn that into concert. When I created concert, we knew that it was also something that wasn't just something that one firm could do or one firm should do. It really needed to be an industry-wide exploration. So I reached out to some of the largest firms in the country because we were part of the AI Large Firm Roundtable. And I met with the CEOs of those companies and asked them some of the same questions about what they were seeing and what they were experiencing. Of the firms that we met with, 6 of them chose to co-invest with us in creating Concert. And so we spun it off as a separate company. We gathered our first round of, I'll call it angel investment. And we began the process of developing the software. In 2021, it was the end of my 15th year as CEO of the company of Cunningham. I really felt it was time for me to transition to something else, as well as I believe the firm needed new leadership. 15 years is a long time to lead a company, and there needed to be new vision at the top of the company. So I stepped aside and joined Concert full time at that point and transitioned from the world of architecture into the world of software.
Awesome. Then you explained the story like it's a smooth path that you passed for building the Concert, but I'm sure you also faced some difficulties along the way. So can you also share, as an entrepreneur, what were the problems that you were facing when you were building Concert?
I think, as with any sort of idea, many people agree with the idea. They may not necessarily agree with how you solve that problem. And while there was as I said, I met with a lot of CEOs of large firms around the country, and ultimately only 6 of those CEOs chose to invest in that idea. For the remainder of them, there was like interest, but it was sort of like, well, we're not sure that this is a problem that we need to solve. We think that somebody else is going to solve it. And ultimately, when that time comes, we'll get involved with it and see where it goes from there. And I think that's a common approach that many architecture firms take, is that for the most part, we wait for somebody to tell us what to do. And I think it's a challenge that the industry has struggled with over the years, because it's ultimately led to, we've lost a lot of value in the industry. We've lost people. We've lost value with our clients. There has been numerous different types of businesses and organizations that have captured the value that we, frankly, we gave up because we just chose to ignore it.
As the Chief Revenue Officer at Concert, what are your main responsibilities and goals?
So we're a small company. There's 4 of us. We have our 2 software engineers that really are focused on doing the coding. And then there's myself and our CEO. And our CEO and I, our jobs are really to get out into the marketplace and talk to people, explore where we might find new opportunities to grow, explore where we might be able to improve the product, to respond to other potential challenges and opportunities in architecture, engineering, and construction. So we're the marketplace. We're out there and we're talking about it like this on podcasts. We're at conferences talking about the problems that architects are facing with regards to digital delivery. We write a lot, So we have a tremendously deep set of blog posts that people can go visit on our website. And and we just continue to look at ways to improve the product by meeting with our customers regularly. That's primarily my job is meet with our customers, find new customers, and ultimately get feedback and input on the product.
If you want to share one key findings from all your efforts that you were doing as the Chief Revenue Officer at Concert, what would be that?
When we talk about or look at the realm of digital delivery, one of the core issues that we face as a professional is how do we capture the intellectual property that we're sharing? Because in the classic model, when we're delivering drawings, the drawing is a clear record of what we produce. It's tangible; you can touch and feel it. In the realm of digital delivery, we start to get into this place where we've created digital content and we've shared that content, and we may not necessarily know, is that our content? Is that somebody else's content? Was it issued, or was it intended to be used for the way it's being used? Those are the real core components of what we're trying to solve at Concert, is create that fingerprint, that digital understanding and identity of what we're sharing, when we're sharing it, and why we're sharing. And that will be incredibly important as we transition more and more into this digital realm, because we won't have those tactile milestones. We won't have those tactile components to go back to. So we need to have a clear digital record. And that's what Concert is entirely built to support.
Great. Can you explain one whole journey of what's happening, like from the architectural design firm until you build the project? So how Concert can help the architects in this sort of journey?
So the design process is iterative, right? There's a chance for improvement and for development all along the line of the design process. And when we started, one of the core things that we do is we try and capture and understand what is the problem our client is trying to solve. Whether they're an institution or a business, they're coming to us with a problem that ultimately has a building that's a component of it, but really it's a business problem. I don't have an effective office space. I don't have a good classroom environment or learning environment. I don't have the right museum environment. All of these components of design that as architects, we understand, we're interpreting all of that from the problem that the client is bringing to us. So I think in this digital realm, historically, we've sort of had these paper documents that we've shared back and forth. In a digital realm, we have much more opportunity to engage the client in a richer and a more focused conversation throughout the design process. We have the capacity to record and be able to go back and quickly and look at previous decisions that we made, so we can understand, why did we choose that product? Why did we do a certain thing a certain way? Why is that space the way the space is? And we don't have to go back to, or we don't have to search for that information, because it's much more available to us in the digital realm. And so we see really this interaction, this sharing of information, as something that starts at the very beginning of a project. Whether it's, it's sitting down, when you're sitting down with the client, you're having those first conversations, when you're gathering programming information, when you're developing conceptual designs, more and more as we get into other digital tools like AI, like, deep rendered solutions, like other components that allow virtual or maybe even AR-based walkthroughs of the space, that we can start to engage the client. Architects will engage the client more deeply in the design process, and also share with them digital information that contains a lot of important information for the life of the project even beyond construction. So capturing all of that will be a critical component of that digital realm. As we move into the development of the design and we build upon those early concepts and we start to create the materials and the systems that are going to build and create the building, and we start to look at how we prefabricate some of those components, we start to look at how the building is going to come together. Traditionally, as the architect, we detail a lot of that information out. We'll draw very specific, very detailed components of the building so we can communicate to the contractor how it should be built. But that design intent now has much more of an interactive component to it because we'll be working more closely with the contractor. We'll be integrating systems that they're going to actually be purchasing as opposed to just, we're specifying something that might be a little more generic. And so our role becomes just as critical because we're still responsible for that interaction. When the two materials or the two systems come together, what's that look like? How does that create the space that we're wanting to create and that we've envisioned in this design process? So we may not be necessarily drawing those same details, but we're going to be heavily engaged in the creation of those details, which is ultimately going to then lead the contractor to using digital tools on the side, digital tools in prefabrication. We know more and more of the building infrastructure is going to be fabricated off-site. It's going to be brought on-site in larger components. It's going to be more of a plug-and-play type of process. We're seeing that certainly in modular construction, but I think we're going to see even more development of that in terms of all the systems in the building being more focused on prefabrication. So having digital information that can allow that process to happen without sort of the mistakes that come from interpreting a drawing. If we're all working in the same space, we're all working in the same model, then we have the opportunity to understand how this is all going to come together more quickly, and we can make decisions. We can identify potential challenges or mistakes or problems earlier. And so ultimately that's going to lead to faster construction. It's going to lead to lower costs for the client. We're going to have better buildings that are going to perform better over time because they'll be more focused on how all those materials and systems are going to help that building perform, and we'll be able to model it and actually model performance along the entire process. So we have this really integrated design and construction process where information is back and forth. And that's where, again, from our perspective as Concert, we can look at that and say, what's critically important here is we know whose information belongs to who, or which information belongs to who, and what is that information to be used for. If I'm working closely with a panel fabricator for the exterior envelope, I need to know where the information that I'm providing stops and where their information begins. And when they share information back with me, I want to know what information is their information so we can compare it against what is our information. So we have this interaction going back and forth, and that's where Concert comes into play. We're creating that mechanism to record and create that record over time, that story of how the building was created from the very beginning all the way through construction. Ultimately, that will help also facilitate operations of the building over the long term, because the owner has this virtual model. There's been a lot of talk about digital twin in the industry. Digital twin is a complicated idea, but the opportunity that exists there is that if we have the right information, if we have all of the systems that were actually installed in the manner that they were installed, then we can know and understand how to operate the building more efficiently over time. And we can also continue to model its performance. We can model changes that we make to it. So it becomes this living, breathing thing that is living in a virtual world.
Love that. Love that. You also mentioned earlier about, the blockchain-based recording system. So what does it mean, blockchain? How you're using blockchain, if you can open it up.
Yeah, so most people know and understand blockchain from from all the discussions about cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Cryptocurrency is simply a platform that works on top of the blockchain. What blockchain is it's a distributed computing system. So where information, when it is placed out into that distributed system, can be verified against previous versions of the information to determine if it's the same information or if the information has been changed. It creates a permanent record that is checked by all of these computers around the world. I mean, information is checked by thousands of computers at the same time to verify that there was a record that relates to that information. If not, then it's new information that a new record can be created. And if the information is a different version of the old information, then it places a new record of that on top of the old records, thus the chain. So it's a block of information that's put on top of a previous block of information in a chain-like fashion.
Great answer. Love that. Okay. So apart from sharing digital information, what are the other problems that you're seeing the AEC industry is facing today?
Well, commoditization is the biggest. As a whole, because we focus entirely on a time-based value process, everything has gotten to the point where if it takes less time to do something, then architects are going to get paid less fee to do it. And there isn't a real correlation between value and effort in that process. It's simply, an hourly employee or a salaried employee where their hours are marked up by a billable rate, and that rate is charged back to the client on the project. That's not a true recognition of value. That's a cost mechanism. And certainly from a management standpoint, it's a way to manage and understand the costs that we're putting into our product, but it's not a value-based system. Real value comes from how much did this design improve the business or institution? How much did the building change the way the community interacts or the community comes together? How much did the building bring in terms of operational improvements over time? How much energy are we saving? How much are we improving the environment through the building? Those are the values of design. And we don't bill for that kind of value. We bill simply based on, well, it's going to take this much time and it's going to have this many people involved. And, I really want to make a markup of 3 times that. So I'm just going to, my target fee is going to be 3 times whatever my cost is. That's not value-based.
And how do you think we can change that? Shall we change the architect's mindset or client's mindset?
It's both. You can't do one or the other. But to do it, one of the core things that architects need to learn to do is talk about value. How do you know what value you're delivering? How do you measure that value? Can you go back to previous projects that you've done and measure how much it improved the business, the institution, how much faster it leased up for commercial products? How did it improve retail sales? There are real metrics, functional metrics that can be tracked and can be measured. And I think the industry needs to be more focused on capturing those metrics, capturing that information, understanding how the design process improved the product or the ultimate business problem that was brought to them, and then how you can price that value. Because one of the core things is going to be understanding if I'm going to, let's just say I'm going to reduce the cost or the time of construction by 6 months. So if I'm going to reduce the time of construction by 6 months by sharing digital information, what's the value to the client? And how do you describe to the client that value, and then what the value for you to deliver that might be? So we have to get into a different mindset where we're looking at there's a series of different value propositions that I'm presenting to the client in my design process. And at the end of each of those value propositions, there's a metric that measures Did I accomplish it? Did I accomplish that? For some, there's going to be too much risk in that model, because the risk is if you don't deliver, you don't get paid. And that could be, detrimental to the firm. But at the same point in time, without risk, there's no reward. So we have to understand that there are risks that we have to take as an industry. And I do think that there are architects out there that are doing that. They do have business models that are focused more on value. There aren't a lot of them. The industry still focuses more on time than on value. I do think that outside of the United States, there is a mechanism, there's more of an understanding of that mechanism. Certainly in Europe, there's a more rigorous approach to the value of design in the entire process. And so I believe that even though architects might say they're not getting compensated better in Europe, some of their American colleagues might beg to differ.
You kind of mentioned that architects don't necessarily understand their values, right? So usually it's project-based, how they're charging, or hourly based. But what if they don't actually bring the values that you were talking about to the client, to the environment? What will happen then?
Again, I think there's the risk in that equation. But from my perspective, if I know and understand that I'm putting myself out there by saying I'm going to deliver this value to my client, I'm going to be pretty focused on delivering that value. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I do deliver that value. And if I see along the way that, I'm not going to get there, or something is happening that's going to present more risk in that equation, then I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to actually, I will try to control that risk. And I do think that controlling risk is, as a part of that equation, also is helping the client understand, if I'm going to deliver that value, let's just say that, core to what I'm going to deliver is a building that's going to be net zero energy. Well, that's going to drive a whole bunch of decisions about the systems and the materials I'm going to use in that building. If the contractor decides to make a change in one of those materials or systems, that has an impact on whether or not I will achieve net zero. I have to have the ability to control that decision. And generally speaking, where we're at today, contractors make those decisions all the time. They change materials, they change systems, and generally it's all based on it'll save the client money. In the longer term, that may not be the case. In the short term, sure, it might save them, 1% or something on the cost of construction. But over time, it might cost them 10% of their operating costs. That's a lot more money than just that 1% on cost of construction. So clients need to have a better, we need to help clients have a better understanding of that cost of decisions that are made. We need to have a better ability to control decisions that are made during the entire process, so that when we're promising outcomes, when we're setting up this value-based system of economics, that we have the ability to make sure we can deliver.
Great answer. What technological advancement do you believe are necessary for the future of the AEC industry?
Oh, you're asking me to predict the future of technology?
Yeah.
That's a slippery slope. I think obviously there's a lot of discussion about AI right now, and there are significant advancements in AI. Generative design as a whole could be a very valuable thing for the industry if we understand how to use it, and if we actually use it in ways that are focused on building value and not simply reducing time. However, I do think that the greater power that lies in AI, and I think this is something that maybe the industry is not focusing as much on, is its ability to analyze information. And that's where we're going to find a higher level of value, because we can model more accurately, and we can understand more completely how a building's going to perform. And the AI can help us understand what small scale adjustments, what little things we can do along the way that are going to improve performance. Of course, core to all of that is that buildings are used by people, and people are not machines. And so from an operational standpoint, how a building operates is entirely dependent upon the people who use and inhabit the building. So there has to be more interaction and more training, more of a focus on that individual and how they're using the space, as opposed to simply setting it and forgetting it, which is kind of the classic model in building operations. And I think that's, again, this is another role that architects can play, because with the design process, we create an understanding of how the building's going to be used. And when it's not being used the way we initially planned, then we can use these tools like artificial intelligence, like digital twin, like a virtual environment, to model those changes and look at how can we make subtle changes to the way it's being used to improve performance. So it's keeping the architect engaged after the building is complete. In the classic model, once construction is complete, the architect's responsibilities are complete.
Mm. And do you see that human will be replaced by AI in the future?
No. AI is a tool. AI is an absolute tool. We design buildings for people, and people are not AI. People are not machines. We can use it, again, we use it as a tool, but I don't ever see it replacing the human component of design.
Okay. And do you think that the jobs are going to change because of AI?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the composition of architecture firms will change. Mm-hmm. There already is more of a focus on people who are good at data analytics. There's going to be more of a focus on people who are potentially, more like anthropologists or sociologists that are going to really be looking at human behavior and how we shape human behavior, or how human behavior shapes space. So I think that the traditional notion of, an architecture firm is just architects and designers and their support staff, that's going to change a lot.
Back to Concert, your solution. Can you share a successful case study where Concert significantly improved a project's outcome?
Sure. So I think a lot of people would be familiar with the SoFi Stadium, which is the football stadium, American football stadium in Los Angeles. It was designed by HKS. That project, if you're familiar with it, has a very complex curved roof that encompasses the entire complex. And that curved roof is composed of a series of triangular panels that have perforations in them that allow a filtered daylight to come through onto the playing field, onto the concourses, and throughout the building. That roof structure, in a traditional system of drawing drawings and delivering them to the contractor, who then gives them to a subcontractor who creates shop drawings, would have been almost impossible to construct at anywhere near the value that was established in the budget. It would just take too much energy and effort. There would be too much risk of information being misinterpreted and panels being fabricated wrong and mistakes just, cascading through the system. So in that design process, HKS, when they designed that roof, they worked very closely with the fabricator for those roof panels. And they created in essence, they took the information from their digital model for that roof structure. And for each of those panels, those triangular panels for the roof, of which there's 35,000 of them, and they created a exported file, a CSV file that went straight to the fabricator and that they could feed into their fabrication machines to fabricate each panel. Because each panel is unique, 35,000 unique panels. No two could be fabricated the same way. They had different hole patterns, they had different geometries, every panel was unique. So to do that in a traditional hand-drawn system, and even hand-drawn on a computer, the potential for error, the potential for misfabrication is just so large, and the unknown components of it would cause the contractor to add so much money to the budget that it would make it economically unfeasible to construct. In the process, I mean, there was a back and forth between HKS and the fabricator, so that there was a clear understanding of, each panel and where it lived inside the roof and how that related to HKS's model. There was a digital back and forth with the contractor, because there's a big, large steel subframe that all this had to attach to. So there was integrated interactions between all of the different contracting entities. There was a digital back and forth with the code officials, because ultimately the code official had to approve this roof structure in an earthquake zone and be comfortable that it was going to withstand any issues that might come up over the long term from a seismic perspective. So all of that was done digitally. All of that was done basically with the early version of the contract software, concert software. And that was all part of the contract deliverables. There were no drawings. There were no sheets that were issued that would necessarily represent that. It was all done digitally. So that's what Concert does. It creates that mechanism so that you can share that digital information, create a permanent record of it, have the back and forth, have the integrated interactions that you need to have so that you can get it done properly, from a construction standpoint and from a design standpoint. And it does it in a way that creates the story from start to finish.
Tim, how do you measure the success in different projects that Concert is facilitating?
Our metrics are really focused on how are we improving the architectural practice? How are we helping them reduce their costs? How are we helping them improve their delivery to their clients? How are we helping them improve the value that they're receiving for that, so that information is being delivered? So our goal is really to ultimately make the architecture firm more successful and give them the tool that they need so they can share information seamlessly, that they can be comfortable, that they have a permanent record, that they have something to go back to if something goes wrong, and that record is safe, secure, and unbreakable from any perspective of potential digital harm that may come.
And how do you gather and incorporate feedback from architectural firms to continuously improve Concert's offerings?
We work very closely with our customer teams. So whether it's at the project level, we'll work directly with the project team on how they're using Concert, how they're integrating it into their project. We work, every architect, they do mostly the same thing. They deliver it slightly differently. So we want to be able to be flexible enough to accommodate any workflow that might come from the architecture firm. And so we want to know at a very deep level how they work, how they deliver, how they interact with their clients, with their contractors, with all the different vendors that they're working with. And then in that context, we can help build a plan for how Concert can be integrated into their systems. And then once they've started using it, feedback from our users is absolutely cool. We want people, we encourage people, we reach out to people to share what's working. What if you could change something, what would you change? What do you need that you don't have? How can we make this even a more effective experience? And that's led to things like, we've got full integrations with Autodesk products. We've got full integrations with Procore. We've got integrations, with Microsoft and SharePoint and Microsoft Office. So we are constantly working to improve the product and to create something that delivers more value for our customers. And it's entirely based on the feedback that we're getting from the users.
How does Concert contribute to sustainability in construction projects? And what challenges do you face in promoting sustainable practices?
So one of the big challenges I think that as an industry we face from a sustainability perspective is the ability to, as I said earlier, track what's being actually put into the building, what systems, what materials, and how those materials and systems operate, perform over time. That historically, we've designed something to be sustainable. We maybe made a material selection, but again, the contractor will come back and say, I can't get that material. That material is too expensive. Here's a different material that it meets the same, or it has the same criteria as the other material. And at the surface, that may be the case. But more and more, what we're seeing is if you dig into how that material is actually going to perform, it won't be the same. No two materials are the same. Mm-hmm. No two systems are the same. Mechanical systems is an area where I think this is a huge challenge that the industry has faced over time. Is we design and specify buildings to be operated a very specific way with very specific equipment. And when that equipment is changed out to a different brand, to a different manufacturer, those systems operate differently. And, if we lose 5% in the operational performance of a mechanical system in a building, that potentially wipes out, a significant portion of any sustainable goals we established in the design process. So we need to be more in control of those systems, and we need to be able to, if there is that change that's going to be proposed to the client, that we can model that. We can, in essence, create the virtual version or what that outcome might be, so the decision could be made in a more effective way. It's not simply a cost-based decision. It's a decision based upon all of the criteria that we set up in the design process for the building and for the building's performance. So sustainability, I think, ultimately requires that we pay attention, that we be engaged throughout the entire process, and that those decisions that we made early in the design process are that we maintain those decisions all the way through, if we're truly going to create the kind of sustainable environments that we believe we're creating. And that ultimately that requires digital record, that requires testing and modeling, and that's what the architect can do. That's what having the capacity to use digital tools to do that can bring. And ultimately, there's an opportunity for us to recognize or be recognized with higher value for that.
Okay. What are your future plans and goals for Concert, and how do you see the AEC industry evolving with these technologies?
Well, obviously, our future goal is that everybody's using Concert. would be a big one. But no, I think our goal is really to facilitate the digital transformation of the design and construction industry. So we move from traditional paper-based systems to a fully integrated digital sharing system, a digital sharing network, where information flows seamlessly across all of the parties in the process. And that's, again, where Concert comes into play. We're creating the mechanism for that record keeping, so that digital information, as it's shared, has a history. It has a fingerprint. It has the capacity to go back and be checked to make sure that it's the right information being used in the right way in the design and construction process.
Tim, thank you so much for patiently answering to my questions.
No problem.
I really enjoyed talking to you. And I hope our audience also enjoyed listening to you and your knowledge, your insights. Do you have final thoughts or messages you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I appreciate what your firm is doing as well, because I do think that trying to manage the way that we evolve the architecture industry, trying to provide architects with tools that help them evolve their practices and help them evolve their understanding of how to capture, communicate, and deliver greater value to their clients, to the community, to the entire built environment. Those are critical tools and resources that we need going forward. And so I applaud what you're doing, because as you're creating this system that really provides resources to the architecture firm that helps them learn, that helps them build a better understanding of how do you communicate value? How do you build value? How do you build a more effective practice? Those are really important things. And so I applaud you for what you're doing.
I really appreciate it, Tim. Yeah, it was really nice to hearing it from you, of course. Thanks again, Tim. It was an honor talking to you.
It was fun. I appreciate the time and I appreciate the opportunity, and I wish you well for the rest of the week. Thank you.